Okay. All right. Get started here. All right. So, welcome everybody back to the weekly Parsha class. Doing a little bit different setup today. So, if you like the setup, make sure to give it a thumbs up. Write in the comments what you like, what you don't like. All right. So this week's Parsha is Parshas Vayetze, and we finished off last week's Torah portion where Yaakov runs away from Esav. Right. Yaakov is tricks his brother about the blessings, and tricks his brother, and gets at first he tricks him out of the birthright, and then he tricks him out of the blessings. And his mother senses that Esav wants to kill Yaakov, brotherly war, and his mother says, "We have to get you out of here." So she comes up with a quote-unquote ruse, and she says that Yaakov has to leave, and she tells Yitzchak that Yaakov has to leave and go get a shidduch. He's 63 years old at the time, 66 years old, however old he was. It's about time. So he goes to yeshiva for 14 years, and then he said it's time for him to go to get married. So he's going to go to his uncle Lavan's house. So that's where we pick up in this week's Torah portion, that he's leaving yeshiva and he's heading to Lavan's house. And in Lavan's house, he's very successful. He's a shepherd, and the business grows. He's in charge of business development. Business grows, and he becomes first. Lavan becomes very wealthy, and eventually Yaakov also becomes very wealthy. And in this week's parsha, we're introduced to Lavan as the first anti-Semite in the Torah, first anti-Semite ever. He's the first anti-Semite, and what's the reason? Why does he hate Yaakov? Because he was successful. So even though, right, that he was clearly successful because of Yaakov, nonetheless, he's jealous, and his family is jealous, and he realizes that this is not going to last. So Yaakov gets up and he has to leave. So this week's Torah portion, and in the Haggadah, it mentions this story as Lavan being the first anti-Semite in the Torah. So we're going to talk about anti-Semitism and use this story to talk about what is anti-Semitism and how can we deal with it. It's a very very important topic. So to understand what is anti-Semitism, right, that Yaakov's father-in-law Lavan and his family were jealous of Yaakov's success, we're going to talk about another story, another conversation of two anti-Semites, of Haman and Achashverosh, right? So we go to the Purim story. And in the Purim story, Haman and Achashverosh have this conversation about what are we going to do about the Jewish people, right? So Achashverosh is presented by Haman. I have this idea, I'll kill all the Jews, I'll get them out of your hair. And you know what? I know it's going to cost you a lot of money in taxes. And he says, I'm going to give you 10,000 silver coins to kind of, so that it won't be such a big hit because the Jews will stop paying taxes because they'll be dead. So I'll give you 10,000 silver coins. And Achashverosh says, nah, you keep the money. I need to get rid of the Jews also. So Achashverosh says to Haman that he doesn't need the money. So the Gemara says, what is this compared to? To two people that one of them had a pile of dirt in his pile of dirt in his field. The other guy has a ditch in his field, and they have a conversation. He says, "Can I get rid of my pile of dirt?" He says, "No problem. You can." And he says, "I'll pay you for it." He says, "I don't need the money. Put it as long as you put it in my ditch, right? That is instead of the money. I don't need the money. I just need to get rid of this ditch, this hole, this void that I have." So we see here that there are two different types of anti-Semitism, two different points where it starts. There's the guy who has what the Talmud calls the guy who has the pile of dirt, and there's the guy who has the ditch. So what's the difference? So the one that has the dirt, what is that idea? It's that the dirt, it represents that there is the Jewish people are taking up space in his field. In other words, that the non-Jewish anti-Semites, they say, meaning in this case we're talking about Lavan or Esav, right? That, like, what are you doing here? Jewish people are supposed to be spiritual, and you're supposed to be studying Torah and doing mitzvahs, right? That was the trade-off between Yaakov and Esav, right? Yaakov was going to inherit the next world. Esav was going to inherit this world. So Esav says, "What are you doing here?" So your mere existence, even the fact that you're like this pile of dirt, the mere existence of it makes me uncomfortable, and that's where the hatred comes from. So a Jew may think, so what if I act like a non-Jew? It doesn't matter. That's not what it's about, because it's the fact that just our existence alone, that is enough to fuel anti-Semitism. Even though it doesn't affect him. And in the case of Lavan, he actually made money, right, from Yaakov, but it didn't matter, because the only thing he cared about was the fact that he existed. Now, then there's the other one. There's the other side of the conversation. There's the Achashverosh side of the conversation. So Haman, his issue was that the Jewish people existed. The fact that they existed made him uncomfortable. Then there's the next part, is the one who has the ditch in his field. So what is that compared to? That is compared to somebody who has a void. They're missing something in their life. So, for example, when the Jewish people were given the Torah, God went to all the nations of the world and he offered them the Torah. He offered it to Esav. Esav wasn't interested. It says don't kill in the Torah, not interested. Went to other nations that don't steal, not interested. He went to every nation. Every nation had a problem with the Torah, right? Except there's Jewish people. Jewish people said the Torah. Well, whose Torah? It's God's Torah. We want to have a relationship with God. That was the Jewish people's answer, and the Jewish people accepted the Torah without questioning anything in the Torah. Torah, yeah, it is difficult to keep everything in the Torah. Obviously, it's not an easy thing necessarily. I shouldn't say it's not easy, but it's not. It sometimes could be inconvenient, right? So, nonetheless, the Jewish people accepted it because we didn't care about what the Torah said. We care about who the Torah came from. It's a gift from God. We're signing up. Okay, but the non-Jewish nations, these anti-Semites, are these people who they feel this void in their life. They realize that they didn't accept the Torah, and they see the Jewish people have success and have meaning in their life because of the Torah, even though they didn't want anything. They didn't want the Torah, right? So even they didn't want the Torah, but they also don't want us to have it, right? So they feel this void, that the fact that we have something that they don't. So this anti-Semite feels that he has to get rid of. He hates the Jews because they have something he doesn't have, right? He has a void in his life. So that's the two types of anti-Semitism. So even if we don't keep the Torah, if we were to, even this anti-Semite, if we were not keep the Torah, it wouldn't help, because the fact is he has the void. The void is in him, right? The void is not that, if the Jewish people, if we hide, if nobody sees us, right, then we're going to, if we hide and we don't exist, then all of a sudden, they're going to be okay. No, the fact is they have a void in their life because they didn't accept the Torah. They don't have meaning to their life. So that anti-Semite is saying, I can't handle the Jewish people, the fact that they exist and they have meaning, and even if they didn't have meaning, the fact is I have the void. So even the Jewish people didn't keep the Torah, the anti-Semites still have hatred in their hearts. So we see here again this two types of anti-Semites. So again, we have the guy who feels that the Jewish people take up space in this world, the fact that we exist alone, whether or not we keep the Torah, whether or not we keep the mitzvahs, and we also have the fact that the anti-Semite who feels the void in his life. So when we want to understand what is anti-Semitism, right? So sometimes we feel like, okay, there's some, going back to the story of Achashverosh and Haman, we kind of feel like, okay, there was some sort of story here that Mordechai had angered Haman, they had this personal feud, right? He didn't bow down or whatever it was. But the truth is that what the Gemara is telling us, or the Talmud is telling us, is that it wasn't because of what we did, right? That this anti-Semitic activity is not because of anything that Jewish people did. It's because they have a void, and they have this pile in their field, that we take up space in what they perceive to be theirs. So now, how do we deal with this? Right? So we know how to not deal with it. We know that we cannot just not be Jewish. That's not going to help, because the problem is with them. It's not with us. It's not like we did something and that caused anti-Semitism. So how can we fight this anti-Semitism? So let's go back to the story of Haman, right? Of the story of in the Megillah. What happened? How was that decree against all the Jewish people? How was that reversed? Mordechai, first thing he does is he gets the Jewish people together, especially the children, and they could declare a fast day, and he gets the children to study Torah and do mitzvahs. And later, when they actually had to do something, right? We can't just sit on our hands, right? We have to actually do something within nature to accomplish, some political activity. So Esther goes and approaches Achashverosh, risks her life to approach Achashverosh. What does she do? She says, "I'm risking my life, right? So I need to have prayer behind me." So she asks the Jewish people to fast and pray for 3 days, and even though that she's going to risk her life, and the only way that Achashverosh is going to accept Esther is going to be that he finds her beautiful and he finds her charming, and he's going to put out his scepter and she will be accepted by the king. But the problem is that she said, "I'm also going to fast," which is seemingly against what the point was, right? The point is that she should be charming to the king. And if she is going to fast as well as the entire Jewish people, then maybe you would think that sounds foolish. She shouldn't be the one fasting. But what they realized was that what Esther relied on it wasn't about her. She realized it wasn't going to be about her success, her personal charm that was going to save the Jewish people, but rather it was going to be following God, right? Which is the only way that's going to happen is going to be through listening to what Mordechai said, right? Mordechai is the prophet. He's the one who God speaks through. So she followed everything that Mordechai said. Okay. Now, let's go to another time in Jewish history where Jewish people faced expulsion and anti-Semitism, is in the story of in the days of prophet of Hosea. So Hosea, at that time, there was during the first temple period, there were two powers who were fighting. There was Egypt and there was Assyria. I'm not sure where Assyria is. I'll leave that for the, if you know, you put in the comments. If you know where Assyria is, you get a special prize. The prize is that you know where Assyria is. So the pasuk says as follows. It's in Hosea 14:4. Assyria will not save us. We will not ride on horses. We will no longer call the work of our hands our gods. So it's Assyria will not save us, meaning that political power will not save us, and neither will horses, meaning referring to Egypt, which is their main export at that time was horses. And we will no longer call the work of our hands our gods, meaning we're not going to rely on our own political activism either. So what does that mean? We're not going to rely on our own, we're not relying on political powers. And similarly, we see later in Jeremiah that the similar story, the Jewish people are a little bit different actually, in a different kind of a story, is that in the times of Jeremiah, Yirmiah in Hebrew, he tells the Jewish people to make peace with Nebuchadnezzar, who would end up destroying the Jewish people. And he goes to King Sidkiah, and he says, "Why don't you make peace with Babylon?" So we see here a little bit different. So on the one hand, we said, don't put our faith in political powers, not in Egypt, not in Assyria, not our own political prowess. And then later, in the story of Hosea, hold on. There we go. In the story of Hosea, something's going on here with the light. So we're going to have a little bit different color. Sorry about that. In the story of Hosea, right, we said we don't follow political powers. And Jeremiah says, make peace with this evil person, Nebuchadnezzar, so at least, we'll pay taxes, we'll pay tribute to them, and maybe they won't kill us. So which one is it? Are we supposed to follow and make political treaties, or we don't rely on political powers? So in the times of what really it's really the same thing. So we see that we don't want to rely on other nations, right? Because really our power comes from God, and at the same time we also don't rely on miracles, right? And even in the times of the Second Temple as well, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, who was one of the rabbis, he felt that the Jewish people should make peace with the Romans. Again, evil people who ended up destroying the Beis Hamikdash, because he felt that maybe the Jewish people wouldn't be massacred and the Beis Hamikdash would not have been destroyed. So what we see here is that what we do is we find ways within nature, we do what we have to do, but we don't rely on outside political powers. We don't say, okay, this political power is going to save us. This political power is going to save us. You see that a lot. The people say, okay, we got to vote, and that's the only thing that's going to save the Jewish people from anti-Semitism. You got to go for this party or that party. The truth is, we have to follow Esther's lead, which is that, yes, we're going to do what we have to do, right? Esther did what she had to do. She went to the king. She beseeched the king, right? We follow within nature. Yes, we have to vote, right? It's an important thing that we have to do, right? Like we see from Jeremiah that he told King Sidkiah to make peace, right? So we have to do what we have to do in order to survive, right? Throughout the Jewish history, Jewish people always, made peace with political powers, and that we're not necessarily friendly. But we don't put our faith in another nation or in another political power. What we do is we put our faith in God. We pray. The answer to anti-Semitism is to be proud Jews, because it's not going to help if we're not proud, and it's not going to help if we try to rely on a political power. We rely on God alone. We do what we have to do. We do what we feel is right politically in order that we should survive and be able to practice the Torah. But what we really need to do is to follow what the rabbis tell us, which is to pray and rely on God alone. Okay, wishing everybody a good Shabbos. Make sure to put in the comments what is Assyria if you watched to the end. And we'll see you, God willing, next week for the Parsha class.